Hello there, everyone, and welcome back to the GSL-English Podcast. My name is, of course, Gideon, and this is a podcast to help you speak more natural, fluent, and confident English. And that is exactly what we are going to do today. Today, we are going to dive into an extremely interesting article, and you will most definitely come away with some new vocabulary and expressions that you can use in your day-to-day conversations in English. So yeah, this is a good one. I'm looking forward to this one. If you are a returning viewer or listener, thank you so much. I appreciate your support. If you are a member on YouTube, we currently have 2 members on YouTube. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support. I really do appreciate it. And if you would like to join as a member, of course you can. But please don't forget, if you haven't done so already, subscribe and follow for more incredible content to help you improve your English. So, as I said, today we are going to read another article together. And this is a brilliant article. Very interesting. It is entitled Opportunities versus FOMO. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. And the kind of premise of the article is whether competition is healthy in life, or perhaps how we as humans make competition unhealthy. Very interesting article. Now, as we go through, to get the most out of this, I do encourage you to really try your best to understand what the article is trying to put across. Okay, try to really understand the meaning. But if you don't get it, if there's any vocabulary or expressions that you don't understand, don't switch off. Stay with me as we are going to break it all down. Okay, we're going to take our time with this one. And we're just going to chill. We're going to relax and just enjoy the English language together and see what we can take from this. So this is your moment right now to pause the video. If you want to grab a cup of tea, coffee, something else, you want to grab some food, and then come back and really immerse yourself into this episode, then this is your time now, because we're going to get reading in a moment. Now, at the outset, we're just going to talk about what FOMO is. Okay. So we're going to break it down, of course, in our analysis. But just to understand that FOMO means fear of missing out. Okay? Fear of missing out. So that is what this article is entitled. Opportunities versus FOMO. So let's go for it. Let's start with reading the article. Listen carefully. If you are watching on YouTube, read along with the text on the screen, or even better, speak along with me. I know that might sound crazy, but just try to get into the rhythm and the flow as I speak. Fantastic exercise to improve your fluency. But if you're not able to do that, don't worry. Just sit back, relax, and enjoy this article with me. Here we go. Opportunities versus FOMO. In Christopher Nolan's The Prestige, we follow the lives of 2 magicians, Robert Angier and Alfred Borden, played by Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. We get introduced to them as 2 young men who want to make it big in the showbiz of magic, until something goes terribly wrong, which causes them to become dreadful rivals of each other. The ruthless competition causes both of them to become obsessed with each other. What is the secret of the other? What is their trick? Can it be surpassed? Needless to say, this obsession doesn't bode well for either of them. The most common advice on competition is twofold. Competition is for losers, and compete with your past self. Both sound great, but we aren't always super helpful. Both sound great, but aren't always super helpful. Let me elaborate. Your ultimate goal is to become a monopoly and get out of the rat race. That is what the first adage is all about. This essentially means don't play others' games. Do things differently. Create your own game. This is good advice, but you don't always have the luxury to create your own rules, especially when you are only trying to get promoted before your rival friend. The second adage is about having a growth mindset. Competing with others can be stressful and in fact degrade our performance. We should instead measure ourselves against our past selves and see how far we have come. This will definitely give us a sense of accomplishment. Also, we should measure ourselves against our future ideal self. This will give us a sense of purpose. While this is a good textbook advice, human beings aren't wired that way. We are social animals. While we love to help those in need, we also love to compete and win. Competition gives us a framework to measure ourselves against others. It tells us where we stand in the world, how far ahead or behind we are from those similar to us. This sense of competitiveness acts like a stressor that motivates businesses to innovate, athletes to break records, investors to make more money. Competition pushes humanity forward, but like all stressors, too much of it is harmful. While competition helps us measure ourselves against others, if we measure ourselves, our career, our wealth, our status or success solely relative to others, we are plagued by a never-ending feeling of inadequacy, incompetence, and poverty. Too much competitiveness results in chronic obsession, which is not very different from the plotline of The Prestige. It never ends well. There will always be someone who is smarter, luckier, more popular, better looking than you. If your only yardstick is comparing with others, nothing you do will ever feel that great. Chronic obsession leads to chronic depression. We need a sense of competitiveness, but in the right dose. Too little, and we become flaccid. Too much, and we don't feel happy or fulfilled. We should be motivated by opportunity, but not plagued by FOMO. When a colleague gets a promotion they don't deserve, it's good to be motivated to game the system to your advantage, but it's foolish to obsess over it. And the difference is very subtle. If you are doing good according to your standards, you don't really have to do anything, even if everybody around you is becoming more successful or making more money. In The Prestige, Robert Angier and Alfred Borden had opposite traits. Angier was a showman, while Borden was a craftsman. They had ample opportunities to compete and learn from each other, but they obsessed only with beating the other. There was no internal yardstick, only extreme competitiveness. A person whose sense of competitiveness has gone into an overdrive is blinded by FOMO. They lack the peripheral vision to look at the big picture and make strategic decisions. No matter how good they are, no matter how much they achieve, it'll never be enough. The sense of competitiveness is innate in us, but it's a double-edged sword. While it can help us grow, too much of it can hurt us as well. It's an animal instinct. We cannot solely depend on it to make decisions. We have to balance it out with an internal yardstick, the human supervision necessary to control the animal in us. What a superb article. I love the way it's written. Again, the link to the article is below. Yeah, that website has other superbly written articles just like that. So, yeah, what did you think of that? Did you get the idea? Just at the outset, I just wanted to present to you my initial understandings just to make sure we are on the same page as we get into the analysis. And remember, when I present my understanding, this is just my perspective. your perspective of this might be a little bit different, and that's not a problem at all. But please do let me know in the comments if you took something different from this article, or if you understood it in a different way. Let me know in the comments, and don't be afraid to do so, or send me an email, because by doing that, by creating that discussion, you're much more likely to connect with this article. And that's what you want to do. If you want to get the most out of this, if you want to remember the expressions and the vocabulary that we're going to look at, find a way to connect with it. And the best way to do that is through your opinion and how you feel. So kind of the idea here, of course, we're talking about competitiveness and how much competitiveness is too much. We can have a choice, can't we, with a competitor, no matter in what situation that is, whether the competition helps us to grow or we obsess over it so much that it actually stunts us. It actually holds us back. That's the kind of idea. And we, because of that competitiveness, we're not setting our own standards of where we are and what we want to achieve. We're constantly comparing ourselves to others and using that comparison to analyze ourselves, which is quite unhealthy. So it's getting that balance, having that healthy competition, but not letting it go into overdrive and overtaking us. And I guess we can apply this in so many different areas: school, work, sports, and particularly the English language. If we are always comparing ourselves to others when it comes to English and not setting our own standards of where we want to be, and comparing ourselves with ourselves, if we're constantly looking at others, then you're kind of always destined to fail. If you're always looking at others as a comparison, as it said in this article, it's never really going to end well. So that's the idea that I took from this, kind of breaking it down and putting it into a nutshell, so to speak. So let's get into it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take it bit by bit and break down some of the expressions and vocabulary that are used. And of course, if you're watching along on YouTube, you can see all of the notes there. Perhaps I'll start making this available as a PDF for you to download. So we started off by talking about a fantastic film, which is The Prestige, directed by Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan is an absolutely amazing director. You've probably seen some of his films. Of course, he did this one, The Prestige. He did Inception, I think, Interstellar. He has such an interesting mind, and that comes across in his movies. But we've got this film, The Prestige. I don't know if you've seen it. We've got Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. Of course, Hugh Jackman is Wolverine, just to put it in perspective, just in case you didn't know. And Christian Bale was Batman, brilliant Batman. But we're following the lives of two magicians in this film, The Prestige. I do encourage you to watch it if you haven't seen it yet. Absolutely brilliant. And it says, we're introduced to them as two young men who want to make it big in the showbiz of magic. Making it big means you want to be a big name. So they wanted to be a big name in showbiz. And that term showbiz is informal, basically, for show business. So they wanted to be in the showbiz of magic, up there. They wanted to be top dogs. They wanted to make it big in showbiz, or the showbiz of magic. As an example sentence, talking about showbiz, could say, sometimes the critics love you and sometimes they hate you. That's show business. So sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. That's the show business. That's that life. So you're introduced to these two guys that really, they both want to be the best. But something goes terribly wrong, which causes them to be dreadful rivals of each other. Before we look at that word dreadful, we're just going to talk about a rival. A rival is someone that you constantly compete against, but in an unhealthy way. It's not healthy competition. It's almost a rival, often that is fueled by anger, hatred, jealousy, whatever it is. But they became dreadful rivals. So if something is dreadful, it can cause fear, shock, suffering. And often we use that term to emphasize the great degree of something. So in this case, were using that term dreadful to emphasize the degree that they were rivals. They weren't just rivals, they were dreadful rivals to a massive degree. So this was not healthy. As an example sentence, we might say, "Oh, I've made a dreadful mistake." So not just I've made a mistake, I've made a dreadful mistake. Great term to use, if you want to add depth or really want to add to the size of the mistake or you have made, I've made a dreadful mistake. So that's how this starts. In this film, you've got these two men and they were kind of using those two characters in The Prestige as a base, as a case study for this article. So then it goes on to talk about their ruthless competition that caused them both to become obsessed with each other. If someone is ruthless, or in this case, it's talking about their ruthless competition with each other, there's often no love. There's no kindness in that. So you can have healthy competition, can't you? But this is ruthless. They will do whatever they need to beat the other. It's cruel. You're determined to succeed without caring about the others. You'll step on them to get over them. You know what I mean? That's what they were willing to do in their competition. So because this was so ruthless, this dreadful rivalry was live between them, that competition caused them to become obsessed with each other. Sometimes in business, you have ruthless competitors. They will not look out for each other. For example, we could say they are ruthless competitors. We need to be careful. If two businesses are ruthless in their competition, they will do whatever it takes to beat the other. So because of this ruthless competition, they become obsessed with each other. What's their secret? What are they doing? Can I beat it? Can it be surpassed? So basically, they were so focused on the other's competition, probably more than themselves. And it goes on to say that this obsession doesn't bode well for either of them. And that's a really interesting term when we talk about something boding well or not boding well. It can mean that something is a sign that something good will happen in the future or that it won't happen in the future. So, for example, in this, we're talking about something not boding well. So it's a sign that something good is not going to happen. Things are going to end badly. As an example, cloud, just reading my notes there. As an example sentence, we could say, there are some extremely dark clouds over there. It doesn't bode well for the barbecue. So maybe you've planned a barbecue with your family, you've got everybody over, and then you look in the distance and there's some awfully dark grey clouds. Well, that doesn't bode well for the barbecue. It doesn't look like things are going to be good. So yeah, great term to use. Doesn't bode well for either of them. So this obsession doesn't do anything good for either of them. So then we once it's set the scene, we talk about this advice on competition. And it says it's twofold, having two parts. Competition is for losers and compete with your past self. So it says, both sound great, but they're not super helpful. Then the article says, let me elaborate. Elaborate. If we elaborate on something, we expand upon it. We give more detail. So in this paragraph, he says, it's twofold, states about these two facts about competition. They're not great. They're not always super helpful. So let me give you more details. Let me expand upon why I say that. And we can use this sometimes again in business, or someone says something that we don't quite understand what they're trying to say, or we don't understand the reasons for what they've said. Maybe they just come out with a bold statement or a plan of action. You think, well, I don't really get what you're trying to say there. You could say, I don't understand what you mean. Can you elaborate? Can you give me more detail? Can you give me more information to elaborate? So that's what he says there. Let me elaborate. Let me give you more detail as to why I say this. So your or one's ultimate goal is to become a monopoly and get out of the rat race. So to become a monopoly and get out of the rat race. You might have seen that board game Monopoly. Have you ever played it? It's a kind of game that can ruin families. You know what I mean? You can have a nice family dinner, then someone says, let's play Monopoly. Always ends in arguments. Well, to get the definition here, we can think about the purpose of that game. What are you trying to do when you play Monopoly? Basically, you're trying to be the best, aren't you? You're trying to be the best on that board. Have the most money, have the most property, and win. Have the most control. So it says here that the goal is to become a monopoly. In whatever we're doing, we generally want to be the best. As a definition, it's an organisation or group that has complete control of something, especially an area of business, so that others have no share. So if we have a monopoly, we have control. And because of that monopoly, it says that we can get out of the rat race. The rat race. Life sometimes feels like a machine, doesn't it? That we just kind of churn through. Well, rat race is referring to the situation in modern society in which people really compete with each other for money and power. Or you just go about your daily life, just in the rat race of life, trying to be the best. And as an example, I found this interesting quote that a total of 66% of people questioned wanted to get out of the rat race. Nobody wants to be in the rat race. It's a difficult life, but we're kind of stuck in it. So it presents that's the idea here. And this essentially means, we don't play others' games, we do things differently, and we create our own game. Basically saying that if we want to be successful, we've got to create our own system. This is good advice, but you don't always have the luxury to create your own rules, especially when you are only trying to get promoted before your rival friends. So here it brings in an interesting point. This doesn't work when we're trying to get promoted just because we want to get promoted before someone else. To get promoted is kind of an upgraded position at work. But then it talks about this second adage. An adage is a wise saying. And it's about having a growth mindset. A mindset that we want we think about life in a way of growing and being better. Competing with others can be stressful and in fact degrade our performance. Isn't that true that when we're constantly competing with others, when we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, it is stressful? It puts a lot of stress on us and it degrades our performance. If we degrade something, we don't give it enough value. It devalues it, degrades what we are doing. Interesting, it makes a statement here that we should instead measure ourselves against our past selves and see how far we have come. To me, that is one of the main points of the article. The biggest competitor we should have is with ourselves, isn't it? Comparing ourselves to others, growth mindset, seeing how far we've come, that will give us a sense of accomplishment. He said also we should measure ourselves against our future ideal self. If something is ideal, it's perfect. Ideal weather is perfect for whatever we're doing. Our ideal self in the future is how we envision ourselves in a perfect situation. So kind of saying, our competition should be with our past self and how we've improved, but also with our ideal future self and where we want to be. This gives us a healthy sense of accomplishment and a sense of purpose. But it goes on to say, that's great advice. Of course, we should all do that. But human beings aren't wired that way. What does that mean? Well, when we talk about being wired a certain way or someone else being wired a certain way, it's used to say that someone does or does not have a natural tendency to behave in a certain way or to like something. So it's saying basically that our tendency, our natural inclination, the way we are wired, doesn't listen to that great advice. It does. We compare ourselves to others. We compete with others. Our brains are not wired that way. As an example, everyone's brain is wired differently. It's true, isn't it? Everyone's brain is wired differently. We are all wired differently. We have different skills, different disadvantages. We have foods we like, we dislike, things we like to do, we don't like to do. We're all wired differently. But it's presenting the idea that human beings as a whole are generally wired to compete. It's that kind of animal instinct we have. Competition gives us a framework or a structure to measure ourselves against others. It tells us where we stand in the world, how far ahead or behind we are from those similar to us. Now, that's not necessarily an unhealthy thing, is it? Whether it's competition or observation, it gives us a little idea of where we are. For example, with this podcast, I don't compare myself to others, but, excuse me, I look at others' channels and perhaps see where I am, with my views and likes and interaction. You just use that as a sense to kind of see how well you're doing. But it's difficult for that not to become an unhealthy comparison, isn't it? So this sense of competitiveness acts like a stressor, something that causes stress, that motivates businesses to innovate. So that idea that, look, we're falling back a little bit. We need to innovate. Well, to innovate is to introduce something new, change, new ideas. As an example, the fashion industry is always desperate to innovate. And that's true, isn't it? Because they sometimes look at others and think, wow, they're really excelling. We're kind of falling behind a little bit. We need to innovate. We need to use that stressor as a motivation. And it's true, isn't it? This is what causes businesses to innovate, athletes to break records, investors to make more money. Competition pushes humanity forward. But too much competition and it becomes harmful. Why? Well, it says, competition helps us measure ourselves against others. But if we measure ourselves, our career, our wealth, our status, where we are in society or success solely or only relative to others, we are plagued by a never-ending feeling of inadequacy, incompetence, and poverty. So let's just break that down a little bit. Competition is good, it can be healthy, but too much, if we're constantly measuring ourselves in every aspect of our life with others, then it's not good. It says we are plagued by these never-ending feelings. If we are plagued by something, it causes worry, pain, or difficulty to someone or something over a period of time. So it's not just a one-time feeling. If we are plagued by something, we are constantly dealing with these feelings. So if we are constantly comparing every aspect of our life just with others, well, it says that we have this never-ending feeling, a feeling that never ends, of firstly, inadequacy. If we feel inadequate, we feel that we're just not good enough. Inadequacy, the fact that something is not good enough or is too small in amount. For example, I always suffer from feelings of inadequacy, feeling that you're not enough. You should be better. So often that feeling of inadequacy comes from the competition or the comparison with others. And then it leads on to incompetence. If we feel incompetent, it feels that we have the lack of ability to do something successfully or as it should be done. That can come from comparing ourselves with others. It just makes us feel incompetent. Makes us feel, I'm not really good at what I do. But when you just compare yourself with yourself, you get that sense of well-being, achievement. But if we are solely comparing every aspect of our life with others, well, if we see that they are doing better in certain areas, well, it can make us feel incompetent. As an example, perhaps we've taken on a new employee at work. He's a great guy, but completely incompetent, meaning he's a lovely person, but lacks all ability. So we've got some interesting words there. Plagued, constantly worrying about something, dealing with it. Inadequacy, not feeling good enough. Or incompetent, feeling like you lack the ability to do something. And poverty, comparing yourself to others in a financial sense can make us feel like we're not succeeding. So you really get the idea here that too much competition, too much comparison really is not healthy. And it says that in the next part. Too much competitiveness results in chronic obsession. chronic. We looked at that, seen this word actually in a few podcasts recently. If something is chronic, it's on repeat, lasting for a long time. As an example, this isn't true, but just an example sentence, I've suffered with chronic headaches for years, meaning they're just on repeat and they last a long time. So here, this results in chronic obsession, long lasting, doesn't go away, which basically is the plot line of this film, The Prestige. Chronic obsession with their competitor. And it makes the statement, it never ends well. There will always be someone who is smarter, more intelligent, luckier, more popular, better looking than you. If someone is deemed to be better looking, then physically they are more attractive. You know, it's true, isn't it? There's always someone better than us in other areas of life. That's just life. We just have to accept that. That's okay. But it says if your only yardstick, a yardstick is a fact or standard by which you judge the success or value of something. So if our only kind of measure of success, if our only measure of how well we're doing is comparing ourselves with others, well, the reality is nothing we ever do is going to feel great. A yardstick, our standard for comparison. If that is our only measure of what is good, you know, if we're doing well, then we're never going to feel that great because there's always somebody doing better. And it makes an interesting statement here that chronic, constant obsession leads to chronic depression. Sorry, I just had a little issue there with my computer. I don't know why, but okay, there we go. Sorry, there we go. Okay, back. Chronic obsession leads to chronic depression. Because of that constant comparison, it can make us feel depressed, make us feel down. And, we do need a sense of competitiveness to be successful. We do need that sense of competitiveness, but in the right dose. If we think of medicine, we have a dosage that we should take, a dosage that is a healthy amount. But too little or too much is not healthy. Same with competitiveness. We have to have the right dose, the right amount. Too little and we become flaccid. I don't know why, if you're watching on YouTube, the F of flaccid is engraved. I can't seem to change it. But if something is flaccid, it's weak and not effective. So too little competitiveness, then perhaps we become a little bit ineffective. But too much and we don't feel happy or fulfilled. We should be motivated by opportunity, but not plagued by FOMO. FOMO, fear of missing out. Basically, we could say fear of what others are doing, fear of someone else being better, fear of missing out on what others are achieving. That should not be our driving force in life. We should be motivated by opportunity, not plagued, constantly thinking, constantly dealing with FOMO. And it gives a great example here. There's an example for FOMO. She always gets FOMO when we go out and don't invite her. So maybe you got that one friend that the only time you don't invite her, she gets FOMO. That fear of missing out on the evening. I think we all get FOMO to an extent, don't we? To an extent. So it goes on to say, when a colleague gets a promotion, we might feel they don't deserve it. It's good to be motivated, to game the system to your advantage. Okay, we might not be happy about it. We don't feel they deserve that promotion, but we use that as a motivation. We use that as a driving force to our advantage. But it's foolish to obsess over it. And the difference is very subtle. I made another mistake there on the notes. I've read these over so many times, but there's still mistakes on the notes. Please forgive me. Foolish, it basically means it's stupid. You'd be a fool to obsess over it, to obsess over competition. And the difference is very subtle. If something is subtle, it's not loud, it's not bright, it's not noticeable or obvious in any way. So we want to be motivated by others, but we don't want to obsess over their success. If you're doing it according to your standards, you don't really have to do anything, even if everybody around you is becoming more successful or making more money. if you're living life according to your own standards, if you're doing things according to what you view as successful, it doesn't really matter what everyone else is doing. If you feel a sense of achievement, if you feel that sense of worth, then who cares what everyone is doing? And it brings it back to the film here. In The Prestige, those two characters, they had opposite traits. A trait is a particular characteristic that can produce a particular type of behaviour. So there's the first one. Angier was a showman. Everything was about the show. Everything is about the visuals. Whereas the other, Borden, was a craftsman. More about the craft of being a magician. So they had different traits, different qualities. Could have used that to their advantage. It says, they had ample opportunities to compete and learn from each other. If you have ample, you have more than enough. And it's true, they had more than enough opportunities to compete and learn from each other. So if they had a healthy view of that competition, they could have learnt from each other. But they were too obsessed with being the best, beating the other. There was no internal yardstick, only extreme competitive. So there was no internal standard that they were governed by. It was simply by the competition with the other. A person whose sense of competitiveness has gone into an overdrive is blinded by FOMO, fear of missing out. Great term next. They lack the peripheral vision to look at the big picture. An interesting term, this, peripheral. Peripheral vision refers to what you can see to each side, up and down, without moving your head, or everything that you can see that isn't in your central vision. So peripheral vision allows us to be a lot more open-minded. We see a wider picture. We see the big picture rather than just straight ahead. And because of that competition, the two characters lacked this. All they could focus on was the other person, not everything else that they could have used to their advantage going on around them. No matter how good they were, no matter how much they achieve, it was never going to be enough. So it concludes by saying, this sense of competitiveness, it is innate in us. Innate here means a quality or ability, one that you're born with, not one you've learned. So this sense of competition, it's innate with us. We are born with a sense of competition. That's why we love sports. That's why, we have that healthy idea, even from a kid, of competing with others. But it's a double-edged sword, meaning it can be good or it can be bad. It can help us to grow, but too much of it can most certainly hurt as well. It's an animal instinct, because even animals have that instinct in them, don't they? And we can't solely depend on that competitiveness to make decisions. The most important thing is our internal yardstick, our sense of competition, our standard of what is successful and what is not. And just as an example for that innate, we could say that someone has an innate gift for languages, meaning that they were just born with an acceptance or an understanding of languages. So really interesting article there. And I guess the takeaway is that, competition is an interesting thing. Competition is, we need it, don't we? We need that driving force. We need that motivation which stems from competing with others. But it should not overtake us. Our level of what we view as being successful should simply come from competition with ourselves. And I think that is such an interesting idea. So absolutely brilliant article there. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any questions, as always, please do let me know in the comments. I'm always here to help. But thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. If you are listening to this podcast on various different platforms, then thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already done so, and I'll see you all very soon. Have a good one, guys.